All right, let's dive into some pretty heavy philosophy today. We're talking about the epistemic basing relation,
Ooh, yeah.
which, in a nutshell, is like, how do the reasons we have for believing things actually connect to those beliefs?
Right.
And I think that's super relevant to anyone who's interested in, like, the philosophy of knowledge, how we justify what we think we know, really, really basic, important stuff in philosophy.
It's one of those things we sort of take for granted in our day-to-day lives, right?
Yeah.
Like, I believe this because of that, but the more you start to kind of pick at that relationship, the more complicated it gets.
Yeah, totally. And we are using the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy as our guide today. And just a heads up to our listeners, it's about to get kind of mind-bendy. We're going to be talking about different theories about this basing relation. And just to throw some fun concepts out there that we'll be talking about, get ready for some deviant causal chains,
Ooh.
superstitious lawyers,
Oh, my.
and even a debasing demon.
Yeah.
So yeah, buckle up.
I think what these examples really get at is that it's not always a straightforward question, right?
Yeah.
How reasons and beliefs connect.
Totally. So let's start off with maybe the most intuitive sounding approach, which would be causal theories.
Okay.
And so, what these theories say basically is that for a reason to really be the basis of your belief, it has to have actually caused that belief. Like no cause, no belief.
I think an analogy that people use sometimes that's helpful is to think of like building a house, right? You can't have the structure of the house without a good, solid foundation. And so, in this case, the reason is like the foundation. And the belief is like the house you build on top of it.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So if you take away the foundation, the house is going to crumble.
Yeah.
If you take away the reason, the belief should fall apart.
Right. And Paul Moser, a philosopher, gives this really helpful analogy too. He compares it to, like a rope supporting a hanging plant.
Yeah.
So the rope is actively holding that plant up. It's not just a coincidence that those two things happen to be next to each other, right?
Right. So there's this sense that the reason is actively supporting the belief.
Yeah.
Not just passively
Yeah.
existing alongside it or something like that.
But then it gets more complicated because Moser says it's also not just enough to believe the proposition. You also have to connect it in your mind to the thing that you believe. He calls this awareness,
Okay.
which is a kind of direct awareness, a non-propositional awareness.
Okay. Break that down for me a little bit. What do you mean non-propositional awareness?
Yeah. So, you could think of it this way, like, that you're thirsty.
Right.
And you have that kind of feeling of thirst before you even think the thought, I am thirsty.
Right.
Right? So it's like a more direct kind of knowledge than having like a full-blown proposition in your head.
So it's almost like a gut feeling or something like that. Like I just there's a direct experience leading to my belief.
Right. But even if you have that causal connection and you have that kind of direct awareness, causal theories run into problems, right? And one of the big problems is deviant causal chains.
Uh-oh.
Just because A causes B and B causes C doesn't mean that A is the reason for C, right?
Yeah, give me a concrete example of this because I think it'll be helpful for our listeners to imagine.
Yeah, so imagine, like, you're walking down the street and you see a friend you haven't seen in ages, and you're so surprised to see them that you trip and spill your coffee all over yourself.
Okay, yeah. Happens to the best of us.
Now, seeing your friend caused you to spill your coffee, but it's not the reason you believe that your shirt is now stained.
Right. So the cause and the reason are not necessarily the same thing. There needs to be some sort of more, I guess, clear connection, it seems like, for it to be the basis of the belief.
Right.
So, I mean, what about situations where the cause, it seems pretty direct, but the reason itself is maybe a little bit shaky? And this is where I think like the superstitious lawyer example comes in, right?
Right. And this is one that people use to try to show that just having a cause isn't enough.
Yeah.
So imagine, like, you've got this lawyer, and the lawyer believes his client is innocent.
Right.
But the only reason he believes that is because he had a tarot card reading, and the tarot card said, your client is innocent.
Okay, so his belief that his client is innocent was caused by the tarot card reading, but is the tarot card reading a good reason?
Right, exactly.
To have that belief. So it's like, yeah, there's the cause, but is it really the basis?
Right, and so then that makes us wonder, well, is the lawyer really basing his belief on the evidence?
Yeah.
Or is he just basing it on this sort of random event that happened?
This is getting really interesting. I'm starting to see that there's more to this basing relation than just did A cause B, right? Like there needs to be something more there to really meaningfully connect the two.
And that leads some philosophers to develop alternative theories, like counterfactual theories,
Oh, okay.
to try to sort of fix the idea of causation to make it work in these cases.
So yeah, let's talk about counterfactual theories. What are those?
Well, counterfactuals are all about hypotheticals, right?
Okay.
What would have happened if things were different?
Okay, so instead of asking like what caused the belief,
Hmm.
we're asking what would have caused the belief if things were slightly different.
Yeah, exactly. And Marshall Swain is one of the main proponents of this view. And he says a reason might be the basis of a belief, even if it didn't actually cause it, as long as it would have caused it if things had been slightly different.
Okay, so let's bring back our lawyer friend who is basing his belief on the tarot cards.
Right.
So maybe the tarot cards were the actual event that, that triggered his belief. But maybe Swain would say that the reason is actually like his desire for his client to be innocent.
Right.
And that would have led to that belief,
Yeah.
even without the cards.
Exactly. So it's like there's some stronger underlying thing that would have caused the belief, even if this other thing happened to trigger it, on the surface.
But how do we know what would have happened? Right.
Oh.
If things were slightly different. I mean, it seems kind of speculative.
Yeah, that's one of the criticisms
That's right.
of counterfactual theories. But Swain uses this idea of pseudo overdetermination to try to get around this.
Pseudo overdetermination.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna need to unpack that word. What does that mean?
Yeah. So you can think of it like a table that has way more legs than it needs to stand.
Okay.
So, if you remove some of the legs, it will still be supported by the other legs.
Okay.
So you could think of those extra legs as like redundant causes.
Yeah.
And so in the case of the lawyer, maybe, the lawyer's desire for the client to be innocent is kind of like one of those extra legs.
Uh-huh.
That even if you took away the tarot cards, it would still be held up by that other stronger motivation.
Okay, I see the analogy. That's helpful. So it's almost like I guess with these counterfactual theories, the belief isn't just floating out there. It's sort of held up by a network of potential reasons,
Yeah.
even if some of them are not as front and center.
Right.
So do counterfactual theories have their own set of problems though?
Oh, of course they do.
Okay.
They do.
This is I'm seeing a pattern here. Lots of different theories, but all of them seem to run into some snags.
Yeah, it's philosophy. It's all about like, testing these ideas and trying to see where they break down.
Yep.
So one of the problems that people point to for Swain's theory is what Tolliver calls the pendulum counterexample.
Okay, hit me with that.
So imagine like you've got a student and they're trying to figure out the period of a pendulum. And so they figure that out based on its length, right? And Swain's theory might mistakenly say that their belief about the period of the pendulum is actually the basis for their belief about its length,
Okay.
when really it should be the other way around.
Gotcha. Okay, so we've got causal theories having trouble with, these deviant causal chains and superstitious lawyers, and now we've got counterfactuals running into issues with, pendulums.
Yeah.
This is really complicated stuff. There's a lot to think about here. It's making my head spin a little bit.
Well, good. It should.
So I guess we need to look at some other ways of approaching this whole basing relation thing, right?
We do.
If none of these are quite cutting it.
There are other theories out there, and they take us even further down this rabbit hole of how reasons and beliefs connect.
All right, let's keep going down the rabbit hole then.
So far we've been like really thinking about these theories that focus on these kind of like external things, right?
Yeah.
Like causes, would it have happened anyway? But like what about like how we think about the reasons for our beliefs?
Okay. Yeah.
And that's where doxastic theories come in.
Doxastic. Okay. That sounds very, very beliefy.
It is. It is. So doxastic theories really shift the focus from the outside world to like your own mind.
Right.
And they say, it's not just about whether a reason actually caused your belief. It's about whether you believe that it's a good reason.
Okay. So my judgment of whether it's a good reason actually matters.
Yeah. And Joseph Tolliver, who we mentioned before with the pendulum, he's a big proponent of this view. And he says that you base a belief on a reason when two things are true. You believe that that reason is good evidence, and you believe that accepting that reason makes your belief more likely to be true.
So I'm not just like passively, receiving information from the world. It's like I'm actively deciding whether or not I think it's good information to have.
Yeah, yeah. So like your evaluation of the evidence is key.
Okay, so what kind of problems do these doxastic theories run into?
Well, one of the problems that people point to is that, it makes it sound like you have to be really like intellectual and philosophical
Right.
to have beliefs at all. So what about like little kids, right?
Yeah, they're not running around, you know, doing epistemology every day.
Right, exactly. And so, but they still like, they clearly have beliefs and they have reasons for their beliefs.
Yeah.
So how do we account for that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
And another problem that people bring up is that, someone could have a completely false belief about what counts as good evidence.
Yeah.
So think about someone like in a cult
Okay.
where they're taught that, whatever the leader says is true.
Right.
So they might believe that that's good evidence, even though, to us, it's clearly not.
Okay, so that's kind of a scary thought, right? Like,
Yeah.
even if it's a bogus reason, as long as they think it's a good reason,
Mm.
then it counts.
Right. And so then that sort of opens the door to like, well, what about manipulation?
Right.
What about like, self-deception?
Yeah.
If we're not careful about, how we judge evidence, then our beliefs could be based on really shaky ground.
Okay, so we've got causal theories having problems with deviant causal chains,
Mhm.
superstitious lawyers. We've got counterfactual theories with these weird pendulum examples. And now doxastic theories seem to have this problem of, like, what if I'm just wrong about what a good reason is?
Right.
So, I mean, every approach seems to have its issues.
Yeah, and that's kind of a key takeaway here.
Okay.
There's no simple answer to this question of how reasons and beliefs connect.
So are we just stuck? Like, do we just throw up our hands and say there's no right answer?
No, not necessarily. I mean, some philosophers have tried to create sort of like hybrid theories
Okay.
that combine elements of these different approaches. So one example of this would be causal doxastic theories.
Causal doxastic. So we're kind of like, I guess, like taking a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
But isn't that just going to lead to even more problems?
Well, it might, but the idea is that you can actually get the best of both worlds.
Okay.
So causal doxastic theories say that both a cause and the right kind of meta belief can make a reason the basis for a belief. It's not like either or.
So it's not like they're just like randomly mashing these two things together.
Yeah.
It's like they're trying to make a more nuanced picture, I guess.
Right. And Keith Alan Courts is one philosopher who has developed this view in a lot of detail. And he says, first of all, we need to be really careful about what kind of cause counts.
Right, right. We don't want to run into those deviant causal chain problems again.
Right. So he focuses on these internal causes.
Okay.
So these are events that happen, within your mind,
Gotcha.
your beliefs, your reasons, your inferences.
So it's not just some random external event. It's like something happening within my own thinking processes.
Right, exactly. And then he also adds this other requirement, which is that the reason can't be rejected.
Okay.
So you can't think it's a bad reason anymore. It has to still be something that's like actively supporting your belief.
So even if something caused my belief in the past, if I now think it's actually a bad reason, it doesn't count anymore.
Right, exactly. So your evaluation of the reason is crucial.
Okay.
But it doesn't stop there. He also puts like all these rules on meta beliefs too.
Okay.
So it's not just any belief about whether something is good evidence. It has to meet certain criteria.
So this is getting really, really complex. I bet there are a lot of philosophers who are not happy with this approach.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, one of the criticisms is that it feels kind of ad hoc.
Yeah.
It's like, well, sometimes it's a cause, sometimes it's a meta belief,
Yeah.
take your pick.
So it's almost like he's kind of avoiding the deeper question, maybe.
Well, Courts would say that he's not avoiding the question. He's just, responding to the reality of human psychology, that sometimes we are driven by these unconscious causes,
Yeah.
and sometimes we really do sit down and think about our beliefs and evaluate them.
Right. So he's trying to capture both of those things, I guess.
Yeah. And it's really that ability to reflect on our beliefs that makes us special.
Okay.
That makes human reasoning so interesting, but it also leads to some really, really cool philosophical puzzles.
Well, I bet. I mean, we've already gone down like 3 rabbit holes today, so
Yeah.
I'm sure there are more to come.
Well, once we start thinking about what these theories mean for like how we think about justification, how we think about knowledge, what does it really mean to say that I know something?
Yeah.
How can I be sure that my beliefs are justified? That leads us into some really interesting, deep philosophical territory.
Okay, let's go there. Let's go deeper. So, okay, we've really gone through it, but with these different theories about the basing relation. I mean, we had causal, counterfactual, doxastic, even causal doxastic. And each of them had their own kind of like take on how our reasons are supposed to connect to the things we believe. But after all of that, like, where are we? Like, do we know any more about like what makes a belief justified than when we started?
Well, I think that's kind of how philosophy works sometimes. It's not always about like finding the answer. It's more about the process of thinking about these things.
Yeah, no, I get that, but it's still kind of unsettling in a way, right? Like if even philosophers can't really agree on what makes a belief justified, how are we just like walking around in the world supposed to figure it out?
I don't think it's as bleak as that. I think, if anything, what these theories do is they kind of help us to see just how complicated our own beliefs really are. Like they shine a light on all the stuff that's going on behind the scenes that we don't always think about.
Yeah, so it's like we're becoming more aware of like all the machinery, even if we don't necessarily understand like exactly how all the gears and levers work.
Right, right. And I think that awareness is really valuable because it lets us ask better questions about our own beliefs. Like, okay, why do I believe this thing? Like, what are the reasons I have for believing it?
Yeah.
And are those good reasons, or am I just believing it because, it feels good, or because, someone told me to believe it, or maybe even because of the debasing demon.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. You brought up the debasing demon again.
Yeah.
So like for those who maybe haven't been following along with this whole deep dive, that's this hypothetical creature who's like messing with our minds
Yeah.
and making us base our beliefs on bad reasons. And it's a pretty scary thought. Like do you think learning about all this stuff about the basing relation, like, can that actually protect us from something like the debasing demon?
Well, I don't know if there's like a surefire debasing demon repellent, but I do think that the more we understand about how beliefs can be based on reasons, the better equipped we are to sort of to examine our own beliefs and see, are these really, really well grounded, or, is there something else going on here?
So it's about like developing our inner skeptic, basically.
Yeah, yeah, having that voice in your head that's like, hold on a second, is this really true, or am I just believing it because it's easy, or because it's what I want to believe?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we don't want to be like, the superstitious lawyer or the person in the cult who's just, taking things on faith. We want to have like good reasons for the things we believe.
Right. And that's what makes us different from those people, that ability to step back and look at our own beliefs and question them.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. So it seems like, this whole exploration of the basing relation, it's not just an academic exercise. It's really about like, becoming more self-aware, I guess, more deliberate in how we form our beliefs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that we have to work on constantly. It's not like we just figure this out one day and then we're good. It's like it's an ongoing process.
Well, this has definitely been quite the deep dive, to use the term of our show. It's definitely made me, think a lot more about my own beliefs and kind of where they come from.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm kind of leaving with more questions than answers, but maybe that's okay.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the point.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think, philosophy is not about having all the answers. It's about, being curious, asking good questions, and just being willing to not know everything.
Yeah, yeah. To live in that
Yeah.
that space of uncertainty.
Yeah, yeah.
So to everyone listening, if we've made you kind of question everything you thought you knew, welcome to the club.
Yeah.
It's not always a comfortable place to be, but it's definitely a worthwhile journey, I think.
Totally. And the pursuit of knowledge, it's a lifelong thing, and figuring out how our beliefs connect to reasons, that's a huge part of that.
Yeah, it's how we become, more thoughtful, more discerning, more, I guess, responsible thinkers.
Yeah.
All right. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. But before we go, I just want to leave everyone with one last thought. You know, if our beliefs can be based on bad reasons, even if we don't realize it, how can we ever really be sure that we know anything at all? So until next time, keep thinking critically, keep asking those tough questions, and keep diving deep.
And don't let the debasing demon get you down.